The girl under the oak tree was dying, and she knew it. Sophie Bennett's lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin stretched tight over bones that jutted at angles no 15-year-old should. 3 days without food. 4 without water. Or was it 5? The numbers blurred together like the edges of her vision. Above her, the massive branches of the old oak in Austin Zilker Park swayed in the early morning breeze, and she tried to remember when she had stopped feeling afraid. It had been dark when Frank left her here. Her stepfather had driven in silence, his jaw clenched in that way that meant another beating might come. But he had not hit her this time. He had simply pulled over near the park entrance, dragged her from the car by her thin wrist, and walked her deep into the trees. Sophie had been too weak to resist, her legs trembling with every step. "Should have never married your mother," Frank had muttered, pushing her down at the base of the oak. 2 years of hell, and now I'm stuck with you. He had walked away, without looking back. Sophie had tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, destroyed by weeks of crying in the locked closet where Frank kept her when he went to work. The closet where she had scratched marks into the wall to count the days since her mother died. 37 marks. 37 days since the cancer took the only person who loved her. Now, lying beneath the tree as dawn broke over Austin, Sophie felt the cold ground beneath her back and wondered if this was how it ended. She thought about her mother's smile, about the art supplies Rebecca Bennett had saved up to buy her, about the small apartment where they had been happy before Frank came along with his promises and his charm. The memories grew fuzzy. Sophie's eyes drifted closed. Then she heard footsteps. Running footsteps, getting closer. Thomas Wright had chosen Zilker Park for his morning jog because the trails were empty at dawn. After 3 years of grief counseling and sleeping pills, his therapist insisted that routine and exercise would help. Thomas had his doubts, but anything was better than lying awake in the house he had shared with Kate, staring at walls that remembered her laughter. The tech company he had built from nothing now ran itself, managed by people who tried to hide their concern when he showed up to the office. At 42, Thomas had everything he had ever wanted except the one thing money could not buy back. His wife was gone, and the fortune he had earned meant nothing without her. He rounded a bend in the trail, his breath coming steady, his mind blissfully blank for once. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A small, broken whimper, barely human. Thomas stopped, listened. There it was again, coming from deeper in the trees. He left the trail, pushing through the underbrush. 20 feet in, he saw her. A teenage girl lay crumpled at the base of an oak tree, her clothes hanging off her skeletal frame. Her blonde hair was matted and dirty, her face pale as death. For a moment, Thomas thought she was already gone. Then her chest rose, just barely, and her lips moved soundlessly. "Oh God," Thomas whispered. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone. Hey, can you hear me?" Sophie's eyes fluttered open. Blue eyes, sunken deep in her skull, struggling to focus. She tried to speak but no words came. "Don't try to talk," Thomas said, his voice cracking as he dialed 911. "I've got you. You're going to be okay." He stripped off his jacket and laid it over her, shocked at how little she weighed when he lifted her head gently onto his lap. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." The 911 operator's voice was calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? "I'm in Zilker Park, about 50 yards east of the main trail near the oak grove. There's a girl here, maybe 15, 16. She's barely breathing. She looks starved. She needs an ambulance right now." "Sir, is she conscious?" "Barely. She's trying to open her eyes." Thomas brushed the dirty hair back from Sophie's forehead, his heart hammering. How long had she been here? Where were her parents? She's so cold. How long until the ambulance gets here? "They are on their way, sir. Stay on the line with me. Can you check if she's breathing regularly?" Thomas bent closer to Sophie's face. Her breath was shallow, rattling in her chest. "She's breathing, but it sounds bad. Really bad." Sophie's eyes opened a fraction wider. She looked up at the stranger holding her, at the concern on his face, and something inside her fractured. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. All the terror and pain and loneliness of the past weeks came pouring out in silent sobs that shook her wasted body. "Sure, it's okay," Thomas murmured, his own eyes burning. You're not alone anymore. I promise you're not alone. Help is coming. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Thomas held the dying girl in his lap and sent up a prayer to the God he had stopped believing in when Kate died. If you're real, he thought, then let this one live. Let me do something that matters. The ambulance roared into the park, lights flashing. Paramedics burst from the vehicle with a stretcher and medical bags. Thomas carefully released Sophie as they swooped in, their trained hands assessing her vitals, starting in 4-line, radioing ahead to the hospital. Severe malnutrition, one paramedic said grimly. Dehydration, possible organ damage. We need to move now. They lifted Sophie onto the stretcher. Thomas stood, his legs numb, his jacket still wrapped around her. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Sophie's thin hand reached out from under the blankets. Her fingers grasped at the air, searching. Without thinking, Thomas took her hand. Her grip was weak but desperate. I'm coming with you, he told her. He looked at the paramedics. I'm coming to the hospital. No one argued. They loaded Sophie into the ambulance, and Thomas climbed in beside her, still holding her hand. As the vehicle sped through Austin's awakening streets, he looked down at the girl he had found under the tree. Her eyes were closed again, but her fingers still clung to his. Thomas Wright had no idea that this moment would change everything. That this broken child would heal wounds in him he thought were permanent. That kindness, offered without expectation, could save 2 lives instead of 1. The ambulance raced toward St. David's Medical Center, carrying a dying girl and a grieving man toward a future neither of them could imagine. Behind them, the oak tree stood silent in a growing light, a witness to where everything began. The fluorescent lights of St. David's Medical Center emergency room hummed overhead as doctors and nurses swarmed around Sophie's bed. Thomas stood pressed against the wall, trying to stay out of the way, his eyes never leaving the pale figure on the gurney. A nurse had brought him a bottle of water, but it sat untouched in his hand. Sir, are you family? A doctor in blue scrubs approached him, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her badge read Dr. Patricia Holmes. No, Thomas admitted. I found her. In the park. I couldn't just leave her. Dr. Holmes studied him for a moment, then nodded. She's lucky you were there. Another few hours, and we'd be having a different conversation. She glanced back at Sophie. We're stabilizing her now, but her condition is severe. Extreme malnutrition, dehydration, signs of prolonged physical abuse. Her organs are starting to shut down. Thomas felt his stomach turn. Will she make it? We're doing everything we can. The next 24 hours are critical. Dr. Holmes paused. The police will want to talk to you. And to her, when she's strong enough. This didn't happen by accident. A uniformed officer was already waiting in the hallway, notepad in hand. Thomas gave his statement, explaining how he had heard Sophie's cry, how he had found her barely conscious. He described what little he had seen, the condition she was in, the desperate way she had reached for his hand. Do you have any idea who she is? The officer asked. No. She couldn't talk. She's just a kid who needed help. The officer nodded, jotting notes. We're running her fingerprints and photo through missing persons databases. Someone must be looking for her. But Thomas had a sinking feeling that no one was looking. The way she had been left under that tree, abandoned like trash. Someone had wanted her to disappear. Hours crawled by. Thomas called his assistant Jamie to cancel his meetings. He should go home, he knew. There was nothing he could do here. But every time he considered leaving, he thought of Sophie's hand gripping his in the ambulance, the terror in her eyes slowly giving way to something that might have been hope. He stayed. By noon, Sophie had been moved to the ICU. Dr. Holmes found Thomas in the waiting room, slumped in a plastic chair with cold coffee. She's stable for now, the doctor said. We've got fluids and nutrients going in gradually. Her body has to relearn how to process food. Too much too fast could kill her. Can I see her? Dr. Holmes hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. She's sedated, but she might be able to hear you. The ICU was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Sophie lay in the bed like a broken doll, tubes and wires running from her thin arms. Her face, cleaned of doubt now, looked even younger. A child? Thomas thought. She's just a child. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "Hey," he said softly. "I don't know if you can hear me, but you're safe now. You're in the hospital and you're going to get better. I know you're scared. I know you've been through something terrible. But you're not alone. Not anymore." Sophie's eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Thomas leaned closer. "What?" "Thirsty," Sophie whispered, the word barely a breath. Thomas pressed the call button. Within seconds, Nurse Grace Miller appeared, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with gentle hands. She checked Sophie's vitals and adjusted the floor. The ambulance roared into the park, lights flashing. Paramedics burst from the vehicle with a stretcher and medical bags. Thomas carefully released Sophie as they swooped in, their trained hands assessing her vitals, starting in 4-line, radioing ahead to the hospital. "Severe malnutrition," one paramedic said grimly. "Dehydration, possible organ damage. We need to move now." They lifted Sophie onto the stretcher. Thomas stood, his legs numb, his jacket still wrapped around her. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Sophie's thin hand reached out from under the blankets. Her fingers grasped at the air, searching. Without thinking, Thomas took her hand. Her grip was weak but desperate. "I'm coming with you," he told her. He looked at the paramedics. "I'm coming to the hospital." No one argued. They loaded Sophie into the ambulance, and Thomas climbed in beside her, still holding her hand. As the vehicle sped through Austin's awakening streets, he looked down at the girl he had found under the tree. Her eyes were closed again, but her fingers still clung to his. Thomas Wright had no idea that this moment would change everything. That this broken child would heal wounds in him he thought were permanent. That kindness, offered without expectation, could save 2 lives instead of 1. The ambulance raced toward St. David's Medical Center, carrying a dying girl and a grieving man toward a future neither of them could imagine. Behind them, the oak tree stood silent in the growing light, a witness to where everything began. The fluorescent lights of St. David's Medical Center emergency room hummed overhead as doctors and nurses swarmed around Sophie's bed. Thomas stood pressed against the wall, trying to stay out of the way, his eyes never leaving the pale figure on the gurney. A nurse had brought him a bottle of water, but it sat untouched in his hand. "Sir, are you family?" A doctor in blue scrubs approached him, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her badge read Dr. Patricia Holmes. "No," Thomas admitted. "I found her. In the park. I couldn't just leave her." Dr. Holmes studied him for a moment, then nodded. "She's lucky you were there. Another few hours, and we'd be having a different conversation." She glanced back at Sophie. "We're stabilizing her now, but her condition is severe. Extreme malnutrition, dehydration, signs of prolonged physical abuse. Her organs are starting to shut down." Thomas felt his stomach turn. "Will she make it?" "We're doing everything we can. The next 24 hours are critical." Dr. Holmes paused. "The police will want to talk to you. And to her, when she's strong enough. This didn't happen by accident." A uniformed officer was already waiting in the hallway, notepad in hand. Thomas gave his statement, explaining how he had heard Sophie's cry, how he had found her barely conscious. He described what little he had seen, the condition she was in, the desperate way she had reached for his hand. "Do you have any idea who she is?" the officer asked. "No. She couldn't talk. She's just a kid who needed help." The officer nodded, jotting notes. "We're running her fingerprints and photo through missing persons databases. Someone must be looking for her." But Thomas had a sinking feeling that no one was looking. The way she had been left under that tree, abandoned like trash. Someone had wanted her to disappear. Hours crawled by. Thomas called his assistant Jamie to cancel his meetings. He should go home, he knew. There was nothing he could do here. But every time he considered leaving, he thought of Sophie's hand gripping his in the ambulance, the terror in her eyes slowly giving way to something that might have been hope. He stayed. By noon, Sophie had been moved to the ICU. Dr. Holmes found Thomas in the waiting room, slumped in a plastic chair with cold coffee. "She's stable for now," the doctor said. "We've got fluids and nutrients going in gradually. Her body has to relearn how to process food. Too much too fast could kill her." "Can I see her?" Dr. Holmes hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. She's sedated, but she might be able to hear you." The ICU was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Sophie lay in the bed like a broken doll, tubes and wires running from her thin arms. Her face, cleaned of doubt now, looked even younger. A child, Thomas thought. She's just a child. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "Hey," he said softly. "I don't know if you can hear me, but you're safe now. You're in the hospital and you're going to get better. I know you're scared. I know you've been through something terrible. But you're not alone. Not anymore." Sophie's eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Thomas leaned closer. "What?" "Thirsty," Sophie whispered, the word barely a breath. Thomas pressed the call button. Within seconds, Nurse Grace Miller appeared, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with gentle hands. She checked Sophie's vitals and adjusted the four. "You don't have to thank us," Thomas said. "You just have to get better. Will you do that?" Sophie nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. But this time, they were not tears of despair. For the first time in months, Sophie Bennett felt the smallest flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Jennifer Wright had been a social worker for 12 years, long enough to know that some cases stayed with you forever. As she sat in the small conference room at St. David's Medical Center with Sophie's case file spread before her, she knew this would be one of them. Sophie had been at the hospital for a week now. Her physical condition was improving steadily. Dr. Holmes had upgraded her from critical to stable. She could sit up now, take small sips of broth, speak in full sentences. But the haunted look in her eyes told Jennifer that the real healing had barely begun. Margaret Sullivan from Child Protective Services joined Jennifer at the table. Margaret was a veteran of the system, a woman in her late 50s who had seen every kind of human cruelty and somehow maintained her faith in people. "The situation is complicated," Margaret said, reviewing her notes. "Sophie's biological father signed away his parental rights when she was 2. Mother's dead. Stepfather is in the wind, wanted for child abuse and attempted murder. She has no other relatives that we can locate. She'll need foster placement." "I have a better idea," Jennifer said. "I want to take her in temporarily. I'm licensed for foster care. I live alone since my divorce, plenty of space. And she already knows me and trusts my brother." Margaret looked up sharply. "You understand this is a conflict of interest. Your brother found her. Has been at this hospital every day. You're personally involved." "I know. But Margaret, she needs stability. She needs people she trusts. I can't provide that." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Let me talk to her. See how she feels about it. But Jennifer, if I approve this, you have to maintain professional boundaries. She's not your project. She's a traumatized child who needs structure and therapy and time." "I understand." They found Sophie in her room, sitting up in bed with a sketchpad Thomas had brought her. She was drawing something, her thin hand moving slowly across the page. When she saw them, she quickly covered the drawing. "Can we come in?" Jennifer asked. Sophie nodded. Grace had braided her hair that morning, and someone had brought her a clean hospital gown printed with tiny flowers. She looked less like a skeleton and more like a young girl now, though she still had a long way to go. Margaret introduced herself and explained the situation gently. "Sophie, your stepfather can't hurt you anymore. But we need to find you a safe place to live while you recover. Do you understand?" "Foster care," Sophie said quietly. She had heard enough horror stories from other kids in her old school, where strangers take you in. "Sometimes strangers," Jennifer said. "But I was hoping you might consider staying with me. I have a house not far from here. 2 spare bedrooms. A yard. I'm a social worker, so I understand what you're going through. And my brother lives nearby. He could visit." Sophie looked at Jennifer, then at Margaret. "Why would you want me?" It was the same question she had asked before, Jennifer realized. This girl who had been treated like a burden for so long could not comprehend someone choosing her. "Because I have space in my home and in my life," Jennifer said simply. "Because you remind me why I became a social worker. And because I think we could help each other. I've been alone too long. My house is too quiet. Maybe we could both use some company." "I don't have anywhere else to go," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not the reason to say yes, Jennifer replied. Say yes because you want to. Because you think it might be good. You get to choose, Sophie. No one is going to force you. Sophie looked down at her hands. They were still too thin, the veins visible under pale skin. Can I think about it? Of course, Margaret said. Take your time. After they left, Sophie sat alone with her thoughts. The sketchpad rested on her lap, her half-finished drawing hidden beneath the cover. She pulled it out and looked at it. She had drawn the oak tree from memory, and beneath it, two figures. A girl lying down and a man kneeling beside her, reaching out his hand. Thomas came by that evening, as he did every evening. He brought food from a restaurant near his office, though Sophie still could only manage small portions. They sat together in companionable silence for a while, the TV playing low in the background. Your sister asked if I wanted to stay with her, Sophie said finally. I heard. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. Thomas nodded. Jennifer is good people. She helped me through a lot when Kate died. But it has to be your choice. What if I make the wrong choice? There's no wrong choice here, Thomas said. Whatever you decide, people will support you. You've got a whole team now. Doctors, social workers, my sister, me. We're not going anywhere. Sophie picked at the hem of her blanket. I don't remember what normal is supposed to feel like. Before my mom got sick, we were happy. We didn't have much money, but we were okay. Mom worked at a bookstore. We'd read together every night. She taught me to draw. She sounds wonderful. She was. Then she met Frank at some church event. He seemed nice at first. He had a good job, a house. Mom thought he would take care of us. But after they got married, he changed. He started drinking, getting angry. Mom was too sick to notice. Thomas listened without interrupting, understanding that Sophie needed to tell her story at her own pace. After Mom died, it got worse. Frank said I was a burden, that I ate too much, cost too much. He started locking me in the closet when he left for work. Said I didn't deserve food. I tried to be good. I tried so hard. But nothing I did was right. None of that was your fault, Thomas said firmly. You understand that, right? You were a child. You are a child. What he did was evil, and it had nothing to do with you. Then why did it happen to me? It was a question Thomas could not answer. The same question he had asked when Kate got cancer. Why do bad things happen to good people? Where was the justice in a world that let monsters like Frank Morrison exist? I don't know, he admitted. But I know this. You survived. You're here. And now you have a chance to build something new. Whatever happened before, it doesn't define your future. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'll stay with your sister. If she still wants me. She does. And Sophie? I'm going to make sure you have everything you need. Education, therapy, art supplies. Whatever helps you heal. Will you let me help you? Sophie thought about the man who had found her under the tree, who had stayed with her every day since, who asked for nothing in return except for her to get better. It went against everything Frank had taught her, that people only helped if they wanted something. But maybe Frank had been wrong. Maybe there really were people in the world who gave without expecting. Okay, Sophie whispered. I'll let you help. Thomas smiled. Good. That's good. Over the next few days, arrangements were made. Jennifer's home was inspected and approved. A bedroom was set up for Sophie with new furniture, soft colors on the walls, a desk by the window. Thomas insisted on providing everything, from clothes to art supplies to books. You're going overboard, Jennifer told her brother as he hauled in the third box of supplies. I can afford it. Let me do this. I know you can afford it. I'm just making sure you understand that money doesn't fix trauma. She needs time and patience more than stuff. I know, but I can give her both. Sophie was discharged from the hospital on a bright Tuesday morning. Grace hugged her goodbye with tears in her eyes. Dr. Holmes gave her strict instructions about her diet and checkups. Detective Turner came by to let her know they were still searching for Frank, that he would face justice. Jennifer drove Sophie to her house in Tarrytown, one of Austin's older neighborhoods with tree-lined streets and well-kept homes. The house was a modest two-story with a front porch and a garden that needed work. "It's not fancy," Jennifer said, "but it's home." Sophie climbed out of the car slowly, still weak. She looked at the house, at the welcome mat by the door, at the wind chimes hanging from the porch. "It looks nice." Inside, the house smelled like vanilla and coffee. Jennifer gave Sophie a tour. The living room, with comfortable furniture and full bookshelves. The kitchen with a small table by the window. Upstairs, Jennifer's bedroom and office. And then Sophie's room. Sophie stood in the doorway, staring. The walls were painted a soft blue. The bed had a thick comforter in shades of cream and blue. There was a desk with a lamp, a bookshelf waiting to be filled, and a dresser. On the desk sat a complete set of professional art supplies in a wooden case. "Thomas," Sophie said. "He wanted you to be able to draw again. He said your mom taught you, and he thought it might help." Sophie walked to the desk and opened the case. Pencils, charcoals, pastels, brushes, paints. Everything an artist could want. She picked up a pencil, testing its weight in her hand. How long had it been since she had created something? "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me. Just be here. Just let yourself heal. That's all I ask." That night, Sophie lay in her new bed in her new room in a house where she was wanted. Outside, the Austin night was warm and full of cricket songs. She thought about the oak tree and the closet and Frank's voice telling her she was worthless. Then she thought about Thomas's hand holding Hayes in the ambulance. Grace's gentle care. Jennifer's patience. All these people who had chosen to help her when they could have walked away. Maybe, Sophie thought, just maybe, she could learn to believe she deserved it. Someday. Detective Lisa Turner stood in the doorway of the small house on the east side of Austin and felt her stomach turn. She had been in law enforcement for 15 years. She had seen crime scenes that would haunt her forever. But there was something particularly disturbing about Frank Morrison's house, about the evidence of slow, deliberate cruelty. The uniformed officer beside her, Officer Daniel Rodriguez, pulled on latex gloves. "You sure you want to see this, detective? Let's get it done." They had gotten a warrant after Frank Morrison failed to appear for questioning. Now, 2 weeks after Sophie's rescue, they were finally inside. The smell hit them first. Stale air, mildew, something rotting in the kitchen. The house was small, maybe 900 square feet. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, 2 bedrooms. One of those bedrooms had locks on the outside of the door. Lisa opened it carefully. The room was tiny, more of a large closet than a proper bedroom. There was a twin mattress on the floor with one thin blanket. No pillow. The walls were bare except for scratches near the floor. Lisa knelt down and examined them. They were tally marks, dozens of them, scratched into the paint with something sharp. Days counted by a desperate girl. In the corner was a plastic bucket. Lisa did not need to look inside to know what it was for. "He kept her locked in here," Rodriguez said quietly, "while he was at work. Maybe longer." Lisa took photographs with her phone, documenting everything. This would be evidence. When they found Frank Morrison, these pictures would put him away for years. The kitchen was worse in its own way. The refrigerator was nearly empty except for beer and conditioned. The pantry had some canned goods and pasta, but clearly Frank had not been cooking for 2. Lisa found Sophie's school records in a drawer. Honor roll student until 6 months ago, then nothing. No attendance, no grades. Frank had pulled her out of school after her mother died. In Frank's bedroom, they found bank statements showing regular withdrawals from Rebecca Bennett's life insurance payout. $50,000, gone in 6 weeks on gambling, alcohol, and what looked like online purchases. He had burned through Sophie's mother's death benefit while starving her daughter. Lisa found a photo album in the closet. Pictures of Rebecca Bennett, smiling and happy, her arm around a younger Sophie at the zoo, at a park, at a birthday party. A family that had been whole once. Then pictures of the wedding. Rebecca thin and tired from chemo treatments, Frank beside her in a cheap suit, Sophie in the background looking uncertain. There were no pictures after that. "Detective." Rodriguez called from the back patio. "Found something." Lisa joined him outside. There were trash bags piled by the fence, their contents spilling out. Fast food wrappers, empty bottles, junk mail. And buried in one bag, a little girl's clothes. Shirts, jeans, a jacket, all of them torn and stained. Frank had been throwing away Sophie's belongings piece by piece. He was erasing her, Lisa said, getting rid of any trace she existed. He was planning to walk away like she never happened. What kind of monster does that? The kind we're going to catch. Back at the station, Lisa updated the case file and sent out alerts to surrounding states. Frank Morrison's face and vehicle description went out to every law enforcement agency in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana. Someone would spot him eventually. Men like Frank always made mistakes. Jennifer brought Sophie to the house 3 days later, but only after extensive discussion with Sophie's new therapist, Dr. Rachel Foster. Dr. Foster thought it might help with Sophie's recovery to face the place where she had been hurt, to see it with new eyes as a survivor rather than a victim. Thomas insisted on coming too. He waited in the car with Jennifer while Sophie approached the house slowly, Detective Turner walking beside her. "We've documented everything as evidence," Lisa told Sophie. "You don't have to go inside if you don't want to. But if you do, I'm right here with you." Sophie stared at the house. It looked smaller than she remembered. More ordinary. Just a house, not the prison it had been in her mind. "I want to go in." They walked through the front door together. Sophie's steps were hesitant at first, then steadier. The living room, where Frank used to drink and watch TV. The kitchen where she had begged for food. The hallway leading to the closet. Sophie stopped outside the closet door. Her breath came faster. "We can stop here," Lisa said gently. "No." Sophie pushed the door open and stepped inside. The small space where she had spent so many hours in darkness. She looked at the tally marks on the wall, at the thin mattress, at the bucket in the corner. All the fear and pain came rushing back. But she was not trapped anymore. She could walk out anytime she wanted. Sophie turned and left the closet, closing the door firmly behind her. "I'm done. I don't need to see anything else." Outside, Thomas and Jennifer were waiting. Thomas took one look at Sophie's face and opened his arms. Sophie walked into the hug, letting herself be held while she cried. Not the silent tears she had become used to, but real, deep sobs that shook her whole body. "I've got you," Thomas murmured. "You're safe. You're safe." Jennifer rubbed Sophie's back, her own eyes wet. "You were so brave in there." When Sophie finally pulled away, she wiped her face with her sleeve. "Can we go now? I don't want to be here anymore." "Absolutely," Thomas said. They drove back to Jennifer's house in silence. Sophie sat in the back seat, looking out the window at the Austin streets. She thought about the girl who had lived in that house, who had survived that closet. That girl was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she was not that girl anymore. She was someone new, someone who was learning to accept help and kindness. That evening, Sophie sat at her new desk with a fresh sheet of drawing paper. She picked up a pencil and began to sketch. Not the oak tree this time. Not the closet. Instead, she drew Jennifer's house. The front porch with the wind chimes. The garden that needed work. The window to her own room, warm light glowing inside. A place where she belonged. Downstairs, Jennifer was on the phone with Thomas. "She did really well today. Better than I expected." "She's strong," Thomas said. "Stronger than she knows." "Thomas, I need to ask you something. What's your endgame here? With Sophie?" There was a pause. "I don't have an endgame. I just want to help her." "I know you do. But you need to be careful. She's starting to depend on you. To see you as a father figure. What happens when she's healed and settled, and you go back to your regular life?" "Jennifer, I'm not going back to anything. This is my life now. Helping Sophie, making sure she has every opportunity. It's the first thing that's mattered to me since Kate died. I just don't want her to get hurt. Or you." "She won't. I promise." But Jennifer wondered if that was a promise her brother could keep. She knew him well enough to recognize the signs. Thomas was not just helping Sophie out of charity. He was healing himself through her. And that was beautiful, but also dangerous. Because what happened when Sophie did not need him anymore? What happened when she grew up and moved on? Jennifer pushed the thoughts aside. That was a problem for another day. For now, Sophie was safe. She was healing, and she had people who cared about her. That was enough. Upstairs, Sophie finished her drawing of the house. She signed her name at the bottom with a flourish. Sophie Bennett. Not Sophie Morrison, the name Frank had insisted on. Just Bennett, her mother's name, her own name. She hung the drawing on the wall, beside her bed where she could see it first thing every morning. A reminder that she had found a home again. 2 days later, Detective Turner got the call she had been waiting for. Frank Morrison had been spotted at a gas station outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. Local police picked him up without incident. He was being held in county jail, awaiting extradition back to Texas. When Lisa called Jennifer with the news, Jennifer immediately went upstairs to Sophie's room. Sophie was reading on her bed, one of the books from Jennifer's collection. "Sophie, I have news. The police found Frank. He's in custody in New Mexico." Sophie set down her book, her face carefully blank. "Is he coming back here?" "Eventually, for trial. But he's locked up now. He can't hurt you. He can't hurt anyone." Sophie nodded slowly, processing. "Good. That's good." But that night, Sophie had nightmares for the first time since leaving the hospital. She woke up screaming, trapped in the dream where she was back in the closet, scratching marks on the wall while Frank's footsteps echoed outside. Jennifer was there in seconds, turning on lights, pulling Sophie into her arms. "You're safe. You're in my house. Frank is in jail. You're safe." Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, having gotten Jennifer's frantic text. He found Sophie in the kitchen with Jennifer, drinking warm milk, her hands shaking around the mug. "Hey," Thomas said softly, sitting beside her. "Rough night?" Sophie nodded. "I thought I was okay. I thought knowing he was arrested would make me feel better. But now I just keep thinking about him. About what's going to happen." "He's going to go to prison for a very long time," Thomas said. "And you're going to keep healing and growing and becoming the person you're meant to be. That's what's going to happen." "What if I can't do it? What if I'm too broken?" Jennifer squeezed Sophie's shoulder. "You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Hurt things can heal. And you will heal, Sophie. One day at a time." Sophie wanted to believe them. She wanted to trust that the nightmares would fade, that the fear would loosen its grip. But she had been through too much to believe in easy recovery. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Thomas said. "But you don't have to be scared alone. We're right here, for as long as you need us." Sophie looked at these two people who had become her lifeline. Thomas, who had heard her cry under the oak tree. Jennifer, who had opened her home without hesitation. They barely knew her, and yet they were here in the middle of the night, offering comfort when she needed it most. "Thank you," Sophie said, "for everything." "You don't have to thank us," Jennifer replied. "This is what family does. We show up. We stay. We help each other through the hard times." Family. The word settled over Sophie like a warm blanket. She had lost her mother, lost any semblance of normal family life. But maybe, just maybe, she was building something new. Something better. A family chosen, not by blood, but by love and kindness and faith in second chances. Spring arrived in Austin with bluebonnets carpeting the hills and warm breezes that carried the scent of mountain laurel. Sophie had been living with Jennifer for 6 weeks now, and the changes were visible. Her face had filled out, her hair was shiny and healthy, and she could walk without getting winded. The physical recovery was progressing well. The emotional recovery was harder. Sophie met with Dr. Rachel Foster twice a week in a sunny office downtown. Dr. Foster was patient and gentle, never pushing Sophie to talk about things she was not ready to discuss. Instead, they worked on coping strategies, grounding techniques, ways to manage the anxiety that still sometimes overwhelmed Sophie in the middle of the night. "Trauma rewires the brain," Dr. Foster explained during one session. "Your body learned to expect danger constantly. Now we have to teach it that you're safe. It takes time." "How much time?" "That's different for everyone. But Sophie, you're doing really well. You're showing up to therapy, you're talking about what happened, you're building relationships with people who care about you. Those are all huge steps." Sophie was not sure she felt like she was doing well. She still jumped at loud noises. She still had trouble sleeping. She still struggled to believe that good things could last. But she was trying, and Dr. Foster said that was what mattered. Thomas continued to visit several times a week, usually bringing dinner from whatever restaurant Sophie wanted to try. He never pressured her to talk, content to simply share a meal and watch her favorite TV shows. Sometimes they played board games with Jennifer. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence while Sophie drew. One Saturday, Thomas arrived with an unexpected proposal. "How would you feel about coming to my house tomorrow? There's something I want to show you." Sophie glanced at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay." Thomas's estate was 15 minutes outside Austin, hidden at the end of a long driveway lined with live oaks. Sophie had heard him mention it but had never visited. As they pulled up to the house, her eyes went wide. It was beautiful. Not ostentatious, but clearly expensive. Modern architecture with lots of glass and wood, surrounded by carefully landscaped gardens. Solar panels on the roof. A garage that probably held multiple cars. "You live here alone?" Sophie asked as they parked. "Yeah. Too big for one person, I know. Kate and I were planning to have kids. Then she got sick, and afterward I just couldn't bring myself to sell it." Inside, the house was immaculate but impersonal. Expensive furniture, carefully chosen art, everything in its place. It looked like a magazine spread rather than a home. Thomas led Sophie through the main floor and upstairs, then down a hallway to a closed door. "This was Kate's studio," Thomas said quietly. "She was a painter. Pretty talented, actually. She used to spend hours in here working on her pieces. After she died, I closed it up. Haven't been in here in 3 years." He opened the door. The room was flooded with natural light from a wall of windows overlooking the gardens. There were easels, a large work table, shelves full of supplies, canvases leaning against the walls. Everything was covered with a thin layer of dust, but otherwise the space looked like Kate had just stepped out for a moment. Sophie walked into the room slowly, taking it all in. "It's amazing." "I want you to have it," Thomas said. "I want you to use this space. All the supplies, all the equipment. It's yours if you want it." I think Kate would have liked that. She always said art was how she processed her feelings. Maybe it could help you too. Sophie turned to stare at him. "I can't. This was your wife's. It's too much. It's been sitting empty for 3 years. That's the waste. Kate would want someone to use it, to create in here. And I think you need a space that's yours, where you can work on bigger pieces, really spread out." Sophie looked around the studio again. It was bigger than Jennifer's entire living room. The light was perfect. The supplies were professional grade. It was every artist's dream workspace. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. Come whenever you want. I'll give you a key. The house is yours." Over the next few weeks, Sophie began spending Saturday afternoons at Thomas's house, working in Kate's studio. At first, she felt like an intruder, touching another woman's brushes, using another woman's paints. But gradually, she began to make the space her own. She cleaned and organized. She set up a corner with her favorite supplies. She started working on a large canvas, something she had been planning in her head for weeks. Thomas would check in periodically, bringing snacks and water, but mostly he left her alone to create. He spent the time working in his office or reading in the living room, happy just to have someone else in the house, to hear footsteps and music and life filling the empty spaces. One afternoon, Eleanor Wright flew in from Boston to visit her son. She had been concerned about Thomas for years, watching him retreat into grief after Kate's death. But his recent phone calls had been different. He sounded hopeful, engaged, almost happy. "I want you to meet someone," Thomas told his mother as he picked her up from the airport. "A woman?" Eleanor asked, her eyes lighting up. "Not like that. Sophie. The girl I told you about." Eleanor had heard the story, of course. Her son finding an abandoned teenager, the subsequent rescue and recovery. She had been proud of Thomas's compassion, but also worried about his growing attachment. "Thomas, you know you can't replace Kate with a child to rescue." "I'm not trying to replace Kate. I'm trying to help someone who needs it. And Mom, she's helped me too. I didn't realize how lost I was until I had a reason to care again." They stopped by Jennifer's house first. Sophie was outside with Jennifer, planting tomatoes in the garden. She looked up as Thomas's car pulled up, wiping dirt from her hands. Sophie, this is my mother, Eleanor Wright. Mom, this is Sophie. Eleanor studied the young girl before her. Thin still, but healthy. Blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Dirt on her jeans. A shy smile. There was wariness in her eyes, the kind that came from hard experience. But there was also hope. Hello, Mrs. Wright, Sophie said politely. Please, call me Eleanor. Thomas has told me so much about you. He says you're quite the artist. I like to draw. She's being modest, Thomas said. She's incredible. Mom, you should see what she's working on in Kate's studio. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Kate's studio. I gave Sophie access to it. She's been using the space on weekends. I think Kate would have approved. Later, when Sophie went inside to clean up, Eleanor pulled her son aside. You gave her Kate's studio. It was just sitting there, Mom. Unused. Wasted. Thomas, are you sure you're thinking clearly about this? This girl, she's not your daughter. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're building your life around her. What happens when she grows up and moves on? What happens when she doesn't need you anymore? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Maybe I need her more than she needs me. Did you think of that? For 3 years, I've been going through the motions. Getting up, going to work, coming home to an empty house. I had all the success and money anyone could want, and none of it mattered. Then I found Sophie, and suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning. Someone to help. Someone who actually needed what I could offer. Eleanor's expression softened. I understand. I do. But Thomas, you need to be careful. Her social worker is right to be concerned. This is a professional relationship, not a family. It feels like family, Thomas said quietly. I know. But you can't force that. It has to happen naturally, if it happens at all. The next day, Eleanor joined them at Thomas's house. Sophie was in the studio, working on her canvas. When Eleanor saw the painting, she stopped in her tracks. It was the oak tree. But not as it had been that terrible morning. Instead, Sophie had painted it in full bloom, surrounded by spring flowers. At the base of the tree stood 2 figures. There. Hands joined. One tall and strong, the other small and fragile. Between them, a path led out of the darkness and into light. It's beautiful, Eleanor whispered. Sophie looked up from where she was adding details to the flowers. It's not finished yet. I'm still working on the colors. The symbolism is very powerful. It's how I remember that day now. Not the worst day of my life. The day everything changed. The day someone heard me. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She understood now why her son was so devoted to this girl. Sophie was not just someone he had rescued. She was someone who had saved him too, pulling him out of his own darkness into the light. Over dinner that evening at Jennifer's house, Eleanor watched the interactions between her son, his sister, and Sophie. The easy conversation, the shared jokes, the obvious affection. It looked like a family. It felt like a family. Maybe Jennifer and Margaret and the other professionals were wrong. Maybe this was exactly what all 3 of them needed. Before Eleanor flew back to Boston, she pulled Sophie aside. I want you to know something. My son loves to help people. It's who he is. But be careful not to let him do everything for you. You're strong, Sophie. You survived something terrible. Don't lose that strength by becoming dependent on his generosity. Sophie nodded, understanding what Eleanor was really saying. I'm trying to remember that I'm not helpless. That I can do things for myself. Good. And Sophie? I'm glad he found you. I think you're good for each other. After Eleanor left, Sophie thought about her words. It was true that Thomas had done so much for her. The medical bills, the art supplies, the access to the studio. Part of her worried that she was becoming a project, a way for him to feel needed. But another part of her recognized something deeper. Thomas had lost his wife and his purpose. Sophie had lost a mother and her sense of safety. Together, they were finding a way forward. Not replacing what they had lost, but building something new. That weekend, Sophie finished her painting of the oak tree. She signed it in the corner, Sophie Bennett, where hope found me. Thomas stood beside her, looking at the completed work. It's perfect. I want to donate it, Sophie said. To the hospital. To the ICU where they saved my life. So other people can see it and remember that bad times don't last forever. Thomas smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. A week later, they delivered the painting to St. David's Medical Center. Nurse Grace was there to receive it, her eyes filling with tears when she saw the image. Oh, Sophie, this is just beautiful. They hung it in the ICU waiting room, where families sat during the worst moments of their lives. Above the painting, they placed a small plaque, donated by Sophie Bennett, in gratitude for the angels who saved her. Dr. Holmes came by to see it during her shift. She found Sophie and Thomas in the cafeteria, sharing coffee and cookies. Your painting is already making a difference, Dr. Holmes told Sophie. I saw a woman stop to look at it this morning. She was crying. Then she smiled. That's a gift, Sophie. The ability to bring hope to people who need it. Sophie felt something shift inside her. For so long, she had been the one receiving help, accepting kindness, taking what others offered. But now, for the first time, she had given something back. Her art, her story, her hope. It felt good. It felt like healing. Summer heat settled over Austin like a blanket, sending people to Barton Springs and air-conditioned malls. Sophie had been with Jennifer for 3 months now, long enough that the guest bedroom truly felt like hers. She had decorated the walls with her own artwork, arranged her books on the shelves, chosen paint colors with Jennifer's help. It was no longer a place she was staying. It was home. School was supposed to start in September, but Sophie was far behind academically. Frank had pulled her out 6 months ago, and even before that, her mother's illness had meant missed days and incomplete assignments. Jennifer arranged for a tutor to come 3 times a week, helping Sophie catch up on everything she had missed. The tutor, Mrs. Helen Bradford, was a retired teacher with infinite patience. She worked with Sophie on math, science, English, history, helping her rebuild the foundation that had crumbled during those terrible months with Frank. Sophie was a fast learner, hungry for knowledge after being denied it for so long. You could skip a grade if you wanted, Mrs. Bradford told Jennifer after a particularly productive session. She's bright. Very bright. She just needs time to catch up. But Dr. Foster recommended against it. Sophie needs to be with peers her own age. She needs social connections, normal teenage experiences. Academics are important, but they are not everything. Thomas had a different idea. One evening, he arrived at Jennifer's house with a folder full of information. I want to talk to you about something, he said to Sophie and Jennifer. I've been doing research on schools. There's a private academy here in Austin, Westlake Prep. Small classes, excellent teachers, strong arts program. I think Sophie would thrive there. Jennifer frowned. Thomas, that school costs $30,000 a year. I know. I want to pay for it. For all 4 years if Sophie wants to go there. Sophie looked up from her sketchbook. That's too much. It's an investment in your future. Sophie, you're talented and smart. You deserve the best education we can give you. Will you at least look at the school? Sophie glanced at Jennifer, who gave a small nod. Okay, I'll look. They visited Westlake Prep the following week. The campus was beautiful, with modern buildings nestled among oak trees. The art facilities were incredible, better than some colleges. The teachers they met were passionate and engaging. Sophie could picture herself there, walking between classes with a backpack, sitting in small seminars, working in the studio. What do you think? Thomas asked as they drove back to Jennifer's house. It's amazing. But Thomas, it's too much. You've already done so much. Let me worry about the money. You worry about whether this is where you want to go to school. I do want to go there, but I feel guilty. Like I'm taking advantage. Thomas pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face Sophie. Listen to me. I have more money than I know what to do with. I made my fortune, and Kate and I plan to use it for good things. To help people. To make a difference. She's gone, but that doesn't mean the money should just sit in accounts. If I can give you opportunities you wouldn't otherwise have, if I can open doors that have been closed, then that's exactly what I want to do. Not because you owe me. Not because I want something in return. But because I can, And you deserve it. Do you understand? Sophie nodded, her eyes wet. I understand. Thank you. So you'll accept the spot at Westlake? Yes. I'll accept. Jennifer was waiting when they got back to the house. Thomas explained about Westlake Prep, and Jennifer listened with mixed feelings. She was thrilled for Sophie to have such an opportunity, but she also worried about the growing dependence, the way Sophie looked to Thomas for everything important in her life. Can I talk to you outside? Jennifer asked her brother. They stepped onto the porch. The evening was warm, cicadas humming in the trees. Thomas, I need you to hear me. You're doing wonderful things for Sophie, but you're also taking over. Every major decision, every big moment, it's you. Not me, not Margaret, not the system. You. What happens if something changes? What happens if you meet someone, get married, have your own kids? Where does that leave Sophie? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. You can't promise her forever when forever is a very long time. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Jennifer, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it. What if I wanted to adopt Sophie? Formally, legally, make her my daughter? Jennifer stared at her brother. Are you serious? Completely. I've been thinking about it for weeks. She needs a permanent family. I have room in my life and my home. We already have a relationship. Why not make it official? Thomas, you can't just adopt a teenager because you feel sorry for her. It's not pity. It's love. I love that kid, Jennifer. I love seeing her heal and grow. I love her quiet sense of humor and her talent and her determination. I want to be her father, not a guardian or benefactor. Her father. Jennifer sat down on the porch steps, her mind racing. Have you talked to Margaret about this? To Sophie? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. You're her current guardian. You'd have to agree. And if I don't, then I'll respect that. But Jennifer, she's not yours either. We're both temporary placements until something permanent is decided. I'm offering permanent. Jennifer thought about the past 3 months. About Sophie's nightmares that were slowly becoming less frequent. About teaching her to cook and garden. About the quiet moments reading together on the couch. She had grown to love Sophie too. Had started to imagine her staying for years, becoming like a daughter. But Thomas was right. Jennifer's home was temporary. She had never planned to adopt Sophie, just to provide a safe place while the system figured things out. And what had the system offered? A series of foster placements, moving Sophie from home to home? Or worse, a group home? Thomas could give Sophie stability. He could give her opportunities beyond anything Jennifer could provide. He genuinely loved her. Was Jennifer's pride worth denying Sophie a permanent family? I need to think about this, Jennifer said finally. And we need to talk to Sophie. This has to be her choice. Agreed. They decided to wait a few weeks before bringing it up. In the meantime, they focused on helping Sophie prepare for Westlake Prep. They went shopping for uniforms and school supplies. They met with the school counselor to ensure Sophie would have support for her anxiety. They arranged for Dr. Foster to do a session at the school to help teachers understand Sophie's background. The Austin community had embraced Sophie's story. Pastor Andrew Carson's church had been following her recovery, praying for her, sending cards and gifts. One Sunday, the pastor asked if Sophie would be willing to share her testimony during the service. Sophie was terrified but agreed. Thomas and Jennifer sat in the front pew as Sophie stood before the congregation, her hands shaking as she held her notes. She told them about losing her mother, about Frank's abuse, about the oak tree and the man who stopped to help. She talked about the doctors and nurses, about Jennifer's kindness, about slowly learning to trust again. I still have hard days, Sophie said, her voice growing steadier. I still have nightmares. I still struggle to believe that good things can last. But I'm learning. I'm learning that there are people who help without expecting anything back. People who choose kindness even when it's hard. People who see someone suffering and don't walk away. She paused, looking out at the hundreds of faces watching her. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Be the person who stops. Be the person who helps. Be the person who gives someone hope when they have none left. Because that person saved my life. There was not a dry eye in the sanctuary. After the service, people lined up to hug Sophie, to tell her how brave she was, to thank her for sharing. Pastor Carson announced that the church would be starting a new ministry to help abused children, inspired by Sophie's courage. "We can't change the past," the pastor said, "but we can change the future. We can make sure that every child in our community knows they are valued and loved and worthy of protection." On the way home, Sophie was quiet. Thomas could see her processing everything, the emotions of telling her story so publicly. "You did really well up there," he said. "I was so scared." "You are incredible. Sophie, you're going to help so many people by being willing to share your story. That takes real courage. My mom always said that the worst things we go through can become the ways we help others. I didn't understand what she meant then, but I'm starting to get it now." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Thomas and Jennifer sat in Jennifer's living room with mugs of tea. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jennifer told her brother. "About adoption. I think you should do it." Thomas looked up sharply. "Really? Really? You're right that Sophie needs permanent. And Thomas, I've watched you with her these past months. You're already her father in every way that matters. Making it legal just recognizes what's already true. What about you? Won't you miss her?" "Of course I will. But Thomas, she'll still be in Austin. She'll still be part of our lives. And this way, she'll have the stability and resources that only you can provide. Plus, your house has a lot more room than mine. That guest house you mentioned, she could have that as she gets older. Privacy but still close by." Thomas felt relief wash over him. He had been worried about hurting his sister's feelings, about seeming like he was taking over. But Jennifer understood. She wanted what was best for Sophie, even if it meant letting go. "When do we tell her?" Thomas asked. "Soon. Give her another week to settle into the idea of Westlake. Then we'll all sit down together. Sophie, you, me, and Margaret. We'll explain the options and let her choose." "What if she says no?" "She won't," Jennifer said with a smile. "Thomas, that girl looks at you like you hung the moon. She's been looking for a father since Rebecca died. You're it. She just needs to hear you say you want her." Thomas felt emotion clog his throat. "I do want her. More than anything." "Then tell her that. Tell her she's not a charity case or project. Tell her she's your daughter, if she wants to be. Give her the choice to be part of your family permanently." "Our family," Thomas corrected. "You're not going anywhere, Jen. Sophie loves you too." "I know. And I'll be the best aunt any kid ever had. But Thomas, you need to be her father. It's what you both need." A week later, they arranged the family meeting at Jennifer's house. Margaret Sullivan came, along with Dr. Foster. Sophie sat on the couch, looking nervous, sensing that something big was about to happen. Thomas took a deep breath and began. "Sophie, we asked you here because we need to talk about your future. About what happens next. You've been living with Jennifer for almost 4 months now. You're doing great, you're healing, you're getting ready for school. But we need to make some permanent decisions about where you'll live long term." Sophie's hands twisted in her lap. "Okay. You have options," Margaret said gently. "We could look into long-term foster placement with Jennifer. Or we could start looking for adoptive families." "Oh." She paused, glancing at Thomas. "Oh, I'd like to adopt you," Thomas said. "If you want me to. I want you to be my daughter. Legally, officially. I want you to live with me, to have my name if you want it, to know that you have a permanent home and family. But Sophie, this has to be your choice. No pressure. No guilt. What do you want?" Sophie stared at him, her blue eyes wide. "You want to adopt me?" "Yes. More than anything." "But why? You barely know me." Thomas moved to sit beside her on the couch. "I know enough. I know you're brave and talented and kind. I know you've been through hell and you're still standing. I know that having you in my life has given me purpose and joy I thought I'd never feel again. Sophie, you're not a burden or an obligation. You're a gift. Will you let me be your father?" Tears streamed down Sophie's face. "You really mean it?" "Every word." Sophie looked at Jennifer. "What about you? I thought I was staying here." Jennifer smiled through her own tears. You've been wonderful to have, Sophie. But honey, Thomas can give you things I can't. A permanent home, opportunities, security. And you'll still see me all the time. I'm not going anywhere. I'll just be Aunt Jennifer instead of Guardian Jennifer. Sophie turned back to Thomas. You want to be my dad? If you'll let me. But I'm not Kate. I can't replace her. You're not supposed to replace her. You're supposed to be you. Sophie Bennett, who survived and fought and kept going even when everything was terrible. That's who I want as my daughter. Not a replacement for Kate, but someone new to love. Someone I get to watch grow up and thrive and become whoever you're meant to be. Sophie threw her arms around Thomas and sobbed into his shoulder. Yes. Yes, I want you to adopt me. I want to be your daughter. Thomas held her tight, his own tears falling freely. Then it's settled. We're a family now. Jennifer joined the hug, and they sat there together, the three of them, building a bridge between loss and hope, between the past and the future. Margaret and Dr. Foster watched with satisfaction. This was how it was supposed to work. This was love winning. The courthouse in downtown Austin was imposing, all concrete and glass under the hot September sun. Sophie sat in a small waiting room with Thomas, Jennifer, and Detective Lisa Turner, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Today was the day she had been dreading for months. Today, she would face Frank Morrison in court. The adoption paperwork had been filed, but the process took time. For now, Sophie still technically lived with Jennifer, though she spent most weekends at Thomas's house, slowly moving her belongings into the guest house he had renovated for her. The space was beautiful, with big windows overlooking the garden, her own bathroom, and a small kitchenette. A teenager's dream, Thomas said. A home within a home. But none of that mattered today. Today was about justice. The prosecutor, Ms. Diane Mitchell, came in to brief them one more time. She was a sharp woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an iron determination to put Frank Morrison away for as long as possible. Sophie, I'm going to ask you to describe what happened. What Frank did, how you ended up in the park. I need you to be specific, but you don't have to go into every detail. Just enough for the jury to understand. Can you do that? Sophie nodded. I think so. Frank's lawyer is going to try to make him look sympathetic. He's going to say Frank was overwhelmed by grief, that he didn't know how to care for a teenager, that he made mistakes but didn't mean to hurt you. I need you to stay calm and tell the truth. Don't let him rattle you. I'll be right there, Thomas said, squeezing Sophie's hand. You won't be alone. The courtroom was packed. Pastor Carson had mobilized the church community, and dozens of people had come to show support. Grace and Dr. Holmes sat near the front. Margaret Sullivan was there. Even Mrs. Bradford had come. Sophie felt a wave of gratitude looking at all those faces, all those people who cared. Then she saw Frank. He sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked smaller than she remembered, older. His face was gaunt, his hair graying. When he saw Sophie enter, his expression did not change. No remorse, no shame. Just blank indifference. Sophie felt her breath catch. Dr. Foster had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could really prepare you for facing your abuser in person. Thomas moved closer to her, his presence solid and reassuring. You've got this, he whispered. The trial began. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. Medical records showing Sophie's condition when she was found. Photos of the closet with the locks. Bank. Statements showing Frank had spent Rebecca's life insurance on himself while letting Sophie starve. It was damning, overwhelming evidence. Then it was time for Sophie to testify. Ms. Mitchell called her name, and Sophie stood on shaking legs. Thomas gave her an encouraging nod. Jennifer blew her a kiss. Sophie walked to the witness stand and was sworn in. Sophie, can you tell the court about your mother? Ms. Mitchell began gently. Sophie took a breath. My mom was amazing. She loved books and art. She worked at a bookstore. We were happy together, just the two of us. Then she got sick. Cancer. She died in March. And where was Frank Morrison during your mother's illness? He married her 6 months before she died. Mom thought he would take care of us. At first, he seemed nice. But after the wedding, he changed. He drank a lot. He was mean. But Mom was too sick to notice. What happened after your mother passed away? Sophie's voice wavered. It got bad. Frank said I was a burden. He started locking me in a closet when he went to work. He stopped buying food for me. He said I didn't deserve to eat. I tried to be good. I tried to be quiet and not bother him. But nothing I did was good enough. How long did this go on? More than a month. Maybe 6 weeks. I lost track of time. Ms. Mitchell approached the witness stand. Sophie, I'm going to show you some photos. These are pictures the police took of the closet where you were kept. Can you identify this? Sophie looked at the images and felt bile rise in her throat. That's where he kept me. I scratched marks on the wall to count the days. Tell the court what happened the night Frank took you to the park. Sophie closed her eyes, remembering. He came home really late. He'd been drinking. He grabbed me and dragged me to the car. I thought he was going to beat me. But he drove to Zilka Park instead. He pulled me out of the car and made me walk into the trees. Then he pushed me down under an oak tree and left. I called out, but he didn't come back. I was so weak I couldn't walk anymore. I thought I was going to die there. But you didn't die. What happened? A man heard me crying. He found me. He called for help. Sophie looked at Thomas, sitting in the front row. He saved my life. Thank you, Sophie. No further questions. Frank's lawyer stood up. He was a tired-looking man named Mr. Brennan, who had clearly drawn the short straw getting this case. Sophie, isn't it true that you and Frank had a difficult relationship? He locked me in a closet and starved me. But you were a rebellious teenager, weren't you? You talked back. You were difficult. Sophie felt anger flash through her. I was grieving my mother. I was 15 years old. Frank was grieving too, wasn't he? He lost his wife. So he tried to kill me. Sophie's voice rose. He spent my mom's life insurance money on himself while I was locked in a closet eating nothing. He dumped me in a park to die. That's not grief. That's evil. Your Honor, please instruct the witness. Judge Anderson, a stern woman with gray hair, cut him off. The witness is answering your questions, Mr. Brennan. If you don't like the answers, ask better questions. Mr. Brennan tried a few more times to paint Frank as a victim of circumstances, but Sophie held firm. She told the truth clearly and calmly, refusing to let him twist her words. When she was finally allowed to step down, Sophie felt drained but relieved. She had done it. She had told her story. She had looked Frank in the eye and not backed down. The trial lasted 3 more days. Other witnesses testified. The medical examiner explained Sophie's injuries. A psychologist talked about the trauma of prolonged abuse. Detective Turner described the empty house and the evidence of Frank's neglect. Frank never testified in his own defense. His lawyer called no witnesses. There was no defense to mount. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. We find the defendant guilty on all counts: child abuse, child endangerment, attempted murder. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Anderson banged her gavel, but she was smiling. Order. Order in the court. Sophie felt Thomas's arm around her shoulders, Jennifer gripping her hand. It was over. Frank would go to prison. He could never hurt her again. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Judge Anderson looked down at Frank Morrison with contempt. Mr. Morrison, you took a grieving child and subjected her to unconscionable cruelty. You betrayed every duty of care. You tried to end her life because she was inconvenient. I am sentencing you to 30 years in prison without possibility of parole. May you spend that time reflecting on the evil you committed. Frank's face remained blank as they led him away. He never looked at Sophie. Never apologized. Never showed a hint of remorse. His sick, Dr. Foster told Sophie afterward. Some people are broken in ways we can't fix. But you're not broken, Sophie. You survived him. You won. That night, the church held a celebration at Pastor Carson's home. It was not a party, exactly, but a gathering of all the people who had supported Sophie through the trial. They shared food and stories. They prayed together. They thanked God for Sophie's survival and for the justice that had been served. Sophie stood in the backyard with a cup of lemonade, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness. Thomas found her there, standing alone under the stars. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel different when it was over. Like I'd be fixed somehow." Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not linear. You're going to have good days and bad days. But Sophie, you stood up there and told your truth. You didn't let him silence you. That's huge. I couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you. Sophie gestured at the house full of people. "A few months ago, I thought I was going to die alone under a tree. Now I have all of this. A family, friends, a future. How did that happen?" "Kindness," Thomas said simply. "People chose to help instead of walking away. You chose to accept that help instead of pushing it away. That's how miracles happen, Sophie. One person at a time, one choice at a time." Sophie leaned against Thomas, and he put his arm around her. "Dad," she said, testing the word. They had started using it recently, getting used to the idea before the adoption was finalized. "Yeah. Thank you. For everything." "You don't have to thank me. I should be thanking you. You gave me a reason to live again." They stood together in the quiet backyard, this man and this girl who had found each other in the darkest moment and built something beautiful. The trial was over. Frank Morrison was locked away, and ahead lay a future full of possibility and hope. Justice had been served. Now it was time to truly start living. October brought cooler weather and a sense of new beginnings. Sophie had been at Westlake Prep for a month now, and she was thriving. The small class sizes meant personal attention from teachers who understood her background. The art program let her spend 2 periods a day in the studio. She had made friends cautiously, testing the waters of normal teenage relationships. Her favorite was a girl named Claire Patterson, a fellow sophomore with curly red hair and an infectious laugh. Claire did not know Sophie's full story yet, just that she had been through something difficult and was living with a guardian. Sophie appreciated that Claire treated her like any other teenager, not like a tragedy to pity. The adoption was nearly finalized. Thomas's lawyers had filed all the paperwork, and the court date was set for December. Sophie would officially become Sophie Bennett Wright. She liked how that sounded. Not leaving her mother's name behind, but adding Thomas's to it. Honoring both the past and the future. One Saturday morning, Thomas asked Sophie to join him in his office. She found him at his desk, surrounded by papers and a laptop open to design mock-ups. "What's all this?" Sophie asked. "An idea I've been working on. Sit down. I want to show you something." Thomas turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a website design. At the top, in elegant script, it read the Rebecca Bennett Foundation. Sophie's breath caught. "My mom." "Your mom," Thomas confirmed. "I've been thinking a lot about your story, Sophie. About how many kids out there are like you were, trapped in abusive situations, with no one to hear them. And I thought, what if we could help them? What if we could create a foundation dedicated to protecting kids who have nowhere else to turn?" He clicked through the mock-ups, showing Sophie the vision. A foundation that would fund safe houses, provide legal assistance for abused children, offer therapy and education support, train communities to recognize signs of abuse. It would be comprehensive, well-funded, and named after the woman who had loved Sophie first. "We'd need a logo," Thomas said. "Something that represents hope and protection and new beginnings. I was hoping you'd design it." Sophie stared at the screen, emotions overwhelming her. "You want to name it after my mom?" "She'd be proud of you, Sophie, for surviving, for healing, for wanting to help others. This foundation would be her legacy and yours. What do you think?" "I think it's perfect." Over the next few weeks, Sophie threw herself into designing the foundation's logo. She sketched dozens of options, trying to capture the essence of hope and protection. Finally, she settled on an image of a tree with strong roots and spreading branches, sheltering a small bud. Beneath it, the word safe, heard, loved. Thomas looked at the final design and smiled. "It's beautiful. This is the one." They officially launched the Rebecca Bennett Foundation in early November with a fundraising gala at a hotel in downtown Austin. Thomas had invited everyone who had been part of Sophie's story. medical staff from St. David's, police officers, social workers, church members, friends and business associates. The ballroom was packed with people eager to support the cause. Sophie wore a deep blue dress Jennifer had helped her pick out. Her hair was styled, her makeup done by a professional. She looked older than her 16 years, poised and confident. But inside, she was terrified. "I have to give a speech," she told Thomas as they arrived at the hotel. "You don't have to. I can handle it." "No, I want to. These people are here because of my story. They deserve to hear it from me." The evening began with cocktails and silent auction. Sophie walked through the room with Thomas, meeting donors, shaking hands, accepting praise she still did not quite believe she deserved. People kept saying how brave she was, how inspiring. Sophie felt like a fraud. She had not chosen to be brave. She had just tried to survive. But then she saw Grace talking to a wealthy businessman about her work in the ICU. She saw Pastor Carson explaining the need for community intervention in abuse cases. She saw Jennifer networking with other social workers, building connections. These people were turning her pain into purpose. They were making sure other children would not suffer as she had. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that made the pain worth something. When it was time for speeches, Thomas took the stage first. He told the story of finding Sophie, of the weeks in the hospital, of watching her heal. He talked about Kate's death and his own grief, how Sophie had given him purpose again. He announced that he was personally donating $5 million to launch the foundation, and challenged others to match it. The room erupted in applause. Pledges started flowing in. Within minutes, the foundation had raised over $8 million. Then Thomas called Sophie to the stage. She walked up on shaking legs, accepting the microphone. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes watching her. "My name is Sophie Bennett," she began, her voice amplified through the speakers. 6 months ago, I was dying under an oak tree in Zilker Park. My stepfather had left me there, hoping I would disappear. I was starved, dehydrated, and out of hope. I thought I would die alone. She paused, gathering her courage. But I didn't die. Because one man heard me crying and chose to stop. He chose to help. He chose kindness when he could have walked away. That man saved my life, and now is going to help save others. Sophie looked at Thomas, standing at the side of the stage. "This foundation is named after my mother, Rebecca Bennett. She taught me that art could heal, that stories matter, that even in darkness there is light. She loved me fiercely until the day she died. This foundation will love kids the way she loved me. Fiercely. Completely. Without conditions." Her voice grew stronger. "Every donation you make tonight will help a child who feels hopeless. It will provide them with safety, with therapy, with legal protection. It will show them that people care, that they matter, that their lives have value. You have the power to be someone's hope. To be the person who stops, who helps, who saves a life." Sophie held up the logo she had designed. "This is our promise. Safe, heard, loved. That's what every child deserves. That's what this foundation will provide. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for choosing kindness." The applause was deafening. People stood, clapping, some crying. Sophie handed the microphone back to Thomas and walked off the stage, her legs weak with relief. Jennifer was waiting with a hug. "You were incredible," Jennifer whispered. The rest of the evening was a blur. More donations. More conversations. More people thanking Sophie for her courage. By the end of the night, the foundation had raised $12 million. Enough to rent office space, hire staff, launch programs. Enough to make a real difference. As they drove home, Sophie was quiet, processing everything. "Do you think my mom would be proud?" she asked Thomas. "I know she would. Sophie, you took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into hope for others. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't have done it without you. We couldn't have done it without each other." The foundation officially opened its doors in January, operating out of a small office near downtown Austin. Thomas hired an executive director, a woman named Karen Hughes, who had decades of experience in child advocacy. She assembled a team of social workers, lawyers, and counselors dedicated to helping abused children. Sophie became the foundation's youth ambassador. She spoke at schools and churches, telling her story, encouraging kids to speak up if they were being hurt. She recorded videos for the website. She worked with Karen to develop programs that would actually reach kids who needed help. One afternoon, Sophie was at the foundation office, helping design promotional materials, when Karen called her into a conference room. Inside was a girl about Sophie's age, thin and scared, sitting beside a social worker. "Sophie, this is Amanda," Karen said gently. "She's in a situation similar to what you went through. I thought maybe you could talk to her. Give her some hope." Sophie sat down across from Amanda, recognizing the look in her eyes. The fear, the shame, the belief that she was worthless. "Hi," Sophie said softly. "I know this is scary. But you're safe now. And you're not alone." Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. "They said you were kept in a closet. That your stepdad tried to kill you." "That's true. It was the worst time of my life. But I survived. And Amanda, you're going to survive too. The people here, they are going to help you. They helped me, and I'm okay now. More than okay." "How long does it take to feel okay?" Sophie considered. "Everyone's different. But for me, it got a little better every day. Some days were harder than others. But I had people who believed in me, who gave me chances, who showed me kindness. The foundation is going to do that for you. They are going to make sure you have what you need to heal." Amanda looked at Sophie with desperate hope. "You really think I can be okay?" "I know you can. Because if I can, anyone can. You're stronger than you think, Amanda. You survived. That's the hardest part. Now you just have to let people help you with the rest." After Amanda left with the social worker, Sophie sat in the conference room alone for a moment. She thought about the girl she had been 6 months ago, broken and hopeless under the oak tree. That girl would not recognize her now, would not believe what she had become. Thomas found her there, staring out the window. "How'd it go with Amanda?" "Good, I think. It's strange, being on the other side. Being the one giving hope instead of needing it. You're still allowed to need hope sometimes, you know. You don't have to be perfect." "I know. But Thomas, being able to help her, it makes everything I went through feel less pointless. Like maybe it had to happen, so I could be here for her." "I don't believe that," Thomas said firmly. "What happened to you was wrong. Evil. You didn't deserve it, and it didn't happen for some cosmic reason. But you're choosing to make meaning from it anyway. That's different. That's you taking something terrible and creating something beautiful. Your choice, not fate's plan." Sophie nodded slowly. "You're right. I just want to help. I want to make sure no kid feels as alone as I did." "You are helping. Look around you. This whole foundation exists because you survived. Because you were willing to tell your story. Because you refused to let Frank Morrison define your future. Sophie, you're changing lives. Including mine." They stood together in the office of the foundation that bore her mother's name, surrounded by files and photos of children they were helping. Outside, Austin bustled with afternoon traffic. Inside, hope was being built one child, one family, one intervention at a time. Sophie looked at the logo on the wall. The tree sheltering the bird. Safe. Heard. Loved. She was all of those things now. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure other kids were too. December arrived with unseasonably cold weather for Austin. The city was strung with holiday lights, and Zilka Park hosted the Trail of Lights, drawing thousands of visitors to see the illuminated displays. Sophie avoided that section of the park, not ready to return to where it all began. But Thomas had assured her they would go together when she was ready. No pressure. No timeline. The adoption hearing was scheduled for December 15th, just 10 days before Christmas. Sophie's stomach had been in knots for weeks. She knew the judge would approve it. The home study had been flawless. Thomas's background check was clean. Sophie's therapy records showed she wanted this. There was no reason for denial. But still, she worried. What if something went wrong? What if some technicality prevented it? What if Frank tried to challenge it from prison, claiming some parental right he did not deserve? "He can't stop this," Jennifer assured her over breakfast one morning. "He has no legal standing. His rights were terminated the day he was convicted. This is just a formality, Sophie. In 10 days, you'll officially be Thomas's daughter. I know. I just keep waiting for something bad to happen. I'm not used to things going right. You're going to have to get used to it. Because, Sophie, your life is full of people who want good things for you. We're not going anywhere. The week before the hearing, Thomas's mother Eleanor arrived from Boston. She was staying at Thomas's house, and Sophie had been nervous about spending time with her. Eleanor was refined, educated, successful in her own right as a retired college professor. Sophie worried she would not measure up. But Eleanor welcomed Sophie with open arms. "Let me look at you," she said when they met in Thomas's living room. "My goodness, you've grown since I saw you in the summer. You're becoming a beautiful young woman." Sophie blushed. "Thank you, Mrs. Wright." "Please, it's Eleanor. Or if you'd like, you can call me Grandma after the adoption. That is, if you want a grandmother." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that." Eleanor pulled her into a hug. "Good. Because I've always wanted a granddaughter, and Thomas is taking his sweet time giving me one the traditional way." Thomas laughed from the doorway. "Mom, I've been a widower for 3 years. Give me a break." "I'm just saying, you're still young. You could meet someone." But Thomas was not interested in meeting someone. His life felt full now, with Sophie and the foundation and purpose he had been missing. Romance could wait. Might wait forever. He was okay with that. The three of them spent the week preparing for the hearing and for Christmas. Eleanor insisted on cooking, filling Thomas's huge kitchen with the smells of her Boston recipes. She taught Sophie how to make her famous cranberry bread, how to properly set a formal table, how to iron napkins into perfect triangles. "These are things your grandmother should teach you," Eleanor said as they worked side by side. "I'm sorry I couldn't do it sooner." "You're doing it now," Sophie replied. "That's what matters." On the evening of December 14th, the night before the hearing, Thomas found Sophie in Kate's studio. She was working on a portrait, something she had been painting for weeks in secret. When he entered, she quickly covered it with a cloth. "Can I see?" Thomas asked. "Not yet. It's not finished." "Fair enough." He sat in the chair by the window. "Big day tomorrow." "I'm scared." "Of what?" Sophie set down her brush. "That I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back in the closet. That none of this is real." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Sophie, do you remember what I told you the first day in the hospital? I said you weren't alone anymore. I meant that. This is real. Tomorrow is real. I'm not going anywhere." But Kate was real too, and she left. Kate died. She didn't choose to leave. There's a difference. Thomas leaned forward. "Listen to me. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise I'll live forever or that life will be perfect. But I can promise that as long as I'm here, you have a father who loves you, who chooses you every single day. That's real. That's forever, as far as I can control." Sophie wiped her eyes. "I don't know what I did to deserve this. To deserve you. You survived. You chose hope when you could have given up. You opened your heart when you could have stayed closed off. Sophie, you deserve every good thing that comes your way. Stop questioning it and just accept it. Can you do that?" "I'm trying. That's all I ask." The morning of December 15th dawned clear and cold. Sophie dressed in the blue dress she had worn to the gala, the one that made her feel older and stronger. Jennifer did her hair in a simple braid. Eleanor gave her a bracelet that had belonged to Thomas's grandmother. "For luck," Eleanor said, clasping it around Sophie's wrist. "And to welcome you to the family officially." They arrived at the courthouse early, the same building where Frank had been tried, but this felt completely different. That day had been about justice. Today was about love. Pastor Carson was there, along with Grace, Dr. Holmes, and Mrs. Bradford. Margaret Sullivan came, smiling proudly. Even Detective Turner showed up, wanting to see the happy ending to the case that had brought her so many sleepless nights. The hearing was in a small courtroom, intimate and warm. Judge Anderson presided, the same judge who had sentenced Frank. She smiled when she saw Sophie enter. "Well, Miss Bennett, We meet again under much better circumstances. Sophie managed a nervous smile. Yes, Your Honor. The proceedings were straightforward. Thomas's lawyer presented the paperwork. Sophie's wishes were entered into the record. Character witnesses spoke, though it was barely necessary. The judge had read the files. She knew the story. Finally, Judge Anderson looked at Sophie. Sophie, this is your chance to speak. Do you want Thomas Wright to adopt you? To become your legal father? Sophie stood, her voice clear and strong. Yes, Your Honor. More than anything. And Thomas Wright, do you accept the responsibilities and joys of fatherhood? Will you provide for Sophie, protect her, guide her, and love her as your own daughter? Thomas stood. I will, Your Honor. With everything I have. Judge Anderson smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I grant this adoption. Sophie, you are now legally Sophie Bennett Wright, daughter of Thomas Wright. Congratulations to you both. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sophie turned to Thomas, and he pulled her into a tight hug. Hey, daughter, he whispered. Hey, Dad, Sophie whispered back. They signed the papers, making it official. Sophie's hand shook as she wrote her new name for the first time, Sophie Bennett Wright. It felt right. Complete. A bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. Outside the courtroom, their friends and family surrounded them with hugs and congratulations. Eleanor was crying openly. Jennifer took 1,000 photos. Pastor Carson said a blessing over their new family. It was perfect. That evening, they had a celebration dinner at Thomas's house. Eleanor had cooked a feast. The dining room table was set with china and flowers and candles. Sophie sat at Thomas's right hand, Eleanor at his left, Jennifer across from Sophie. A family, assembled from loss and love and choice. After dinner, Sophie disappeared upstairs and returned carrying the covered canvas from the studio. I made something for you, she told Thomas. For us. She pulled away the cloth, revealing the portrait she had been working on. It showed Thomas and Sophie standing together in front of the oak tree. But the tree was blooming now, covered in flowers and vibrant leaves. Behind them, painted in soft, ghostly strokes, were two figures, Rebecca and Kate, watching over them with gentle smiles. It's our family, Sophie said. All of us. The ones here and the ones who brought us together. Thomas stared at the painting, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found words, his voice was thick with emotion. Sophie, it's beautiful. It's perfect. I wanted to honor everyone who made this possible. Mom, for teaching me to be strong. Kate, for leaving behind someone who could love me. You, for stopping. Jennifer, for opening her home. All of you. Sophie looked around the table. This is my family now. All of you. Eleanor raised her glass. To family. To second chances. To love that builds bridges across loss. They all raised their glasses, toasting to new beginnings. Later, after Eleanor and Jennifer had gone home, Sophie and Thomas hung the portrait in the main hallway where visitors would see it. When they entered, a reminder of where they had come from and where they were going. Thank you, Dad, Sophie said as they stood back to admire it. For choosing me. Thank you for letting me, Thomas replied. You saved me just as much as I saved you, you know. Sophie smiled. I know. That night, Sophie lay in her bed in the guest house, looking out at the main house where lights glowed warm in the windows. Her father's house. Her home. She thought about the girl who had been locked in a closet, who had believed she was worthless and unloved. That girl seemed like someone from another lifetime. Sophie Bennett Wright had a family now. She had a father who adored her, an aunt who supported her, a grandmother who taught her family recipes. She had friends at school, a foundation bearing her mother's name, and a future full of possibilities. The nightmares still came sometimes. The anxiety still fled. The trauma did not just disappear because she had been adopted. But now when she woke up scared, she could call her dad. When she felt overwhelmed, she had Dr. Foster. When she needed to talk, Jennifer was always available. She was not alone anymore. She would never be alone again. Sophie pulled out her phone and sent Thomas a text. Thank you for being my dad. I love you. His response came immediately. I love you too, Sophie. Sweet dreams, daughter. Sophie smiled and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would wake up as Sophie Bennett Wright, officially and legally. Tomorrow and every day after, she would have a family who chose her, who loved her, who believed in her potential. Tomorrow and every day after, she would remember that kindness had saved her life. And she would spend the rest of her days paying that kindness forward, being the hope for someone else that Thomas had been for her. The oak tree had been the end of one life. But it had also been the beginning of another. A better one. A life full of love and purpose and belonging. Sophie fell asleep smiling, wrapped in the safety of knowing she was home. 5 years later, Sophie Bennett Wright stood in front of her mirror in the apartment she shared with her roommate near the University of Texas campus. She was 21 now, a senior majoring in art therapy with a minor in social work. Her blonde hair was longer, falling past her shoulders. Her face had lost the last traces of the gaunt teenager she had been. She looked healthy, happy, confident. Today was special. The anniversary. 5 years since Thomas had found her under the oak tree in Zilker Park. Sophie pulled on jeans and a bright green sweater, grabbed her jacket, and headed out. The December morning was crisp and clear, perfect Austin weather. She drove to Thomas's house, where he was waiting on the front porch with 2 travel mugs of coffee. "Morning, Dad," Sophie said, accepting the mug and kissing his cheek. "Morning, sweetheart. Ready." Ready. They drove to Zilker Park in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and listening to music. Thomas was 51 now, gray threading through his hair, but he looked younger than he had 5 years ago. Happier. Purpose and love had erased years from his face. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams. With offices in 3 Texas cities and plans to expand to Oklahoma and Louisiana, the Rebecca Bennett Foundation had helped over 2,000 children escape abusive situations. They had funded safe houses, provided legal representation, offered therapy and education support. Sophie served on the board while completing her degree, and she would join the staff full-time after graduation. Thomas pulled into the Zilker Park parking lot, and they walked together toward the oak grove. It had become tradition to come here every year on the anniversary, to remember and to honor how far they had come. As they approached, Sophie saw that someone else was already there. A woman in her 30s with 2 young children, standing near the tree, reading something. Sophie and Thomas slowed, not wanting to intrude. But the woman turned and saw them, her face lighting up with recognition. "Are you Sophie Wright?" she asked. Sophie nodded cautiously. "Yes. I'm Rebecca Chen. I saw your story on the news years ago. You inspired me to leave my abusive husband. Your foundation helped me get a lawyer, find housing, get back on my feet. These are my kids, Anna and Michael. We're here because of you." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so glad you got out. That you're safe." "We are. And I wanted to show my kids this tree, tell them about the brave girl who survived here. About how sometimes the worst places become sacred because of what happens after." The 2 children, maybe 6 and 8 years old, looked at Sophie with wide eyes. "You were under this tree?" the little girl asked. "I was," Sophie said softly, kneeling to her level. "A long time ago, when I was sad and scared. But this man here, my dad, he heard me and he helped me. And now I'm okay. More than okay." "Mommy says you help kids like you were helped," the boy said. "That's right. Because when people help us, we should help others too. That's how we make the world better." Rebecca thanked them again and led her children away, but not before getting a photo with Sophie. As they walked off, Sophie heard the little girl ask, "Can I help people too when I grow up?" "You can do anything you want, baby," Rebecca replied. Thomas put his arm around Sophie's shoulders. "You're changing lives, kid. We're changing lives. I couldn't do any of it without you." They walked closer to the oak tree. At its base, there was now a memorial bench made of carved wood. Thomas had commissioned it 3 years ago, after getting permission from the Parks Department. The plaque read, "Where Hope Found Me, in memory of Rebecca Bennett and Kate Wright, and in honor of the kindness that saves lives." Sophie and Thomas sat on the bench together, looking up at the massive tree. Birds nested in its branches. Squirrels chased each other along the trunk. Life flourished here, as it always had. The tree had witnessed Sophie's lowest moment, but it had also witnessed her rescue. It held both stories in its ancient roots. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been jogging here that morning? Sophie asked. Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on it. I was here. I did hear you. That's what matters. Did you know when you found me that you'd end up adopting me? That we'd become a family? Thomas considered. No. That morning, I just wanted you to survive. Then I wanted you to heal. Then I wanted you to thrive. Each step led to the next. But Sophie, adopting you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You saved mine when it almost was over. I think we're even. They sat in peaceful silence, watching other park visitors jog past, walk dogs, push strollers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the sacred ground they walked on. To them, it was just a tree. To Sophie and Thomas, it was the place where everything changed. Sophie pulled out her phone and showed Thomas something she had been working on. I've been writing a book. A memoir. Dr. Foster thinks it could help people understand childhood trauma better. I wanted to show you before I sent it to publishers. Thomas scrolled through the document on her phone, reading chapter titles. From Darkness to Dawn, a survivor's story of hope. What do you think? Is it too much? Sophie, I think it's perfect. Your voice, your truth, your journey. This is going to help so many people. I dedicated it to you and Mom. For Rebecca, who taught me strength, and for Thomas, who showed me kindness. Thomas felt emotion tight in his throat. She would be so proud of you, of the woman you've become. I hope so. I think about her all the time. What she'd think of the foundation, of us, of my degree. I like to imagine she's watching somehow, glad I'm okay. I'm sure she is. And Kate too. They'd both be happy we found each other. A jogger passed by and waved at them. Sophie waved back, recognizing a fellow student from UT. Normal interactions. Normal life. She had fought so hard for normal, and now she had it. College, friends, a boyfriend named Derek who made her laugh and understood her past without pitying her. A career path she was passionate about. A family who loved her unconditionally. How's Derek? Thomas asked, as if reading her mind. Good. He's spending Christmas with his family in Houston, but he'll be back for New Year's. I think you'll like him. If he makes you happy, I like him. But if he ever hurts you, I know. You'll destroy him. Very protective dad of you. Thomas laughed. It's in the job description. They stayed at the park for another hour, walking the trails, talking about Sophie's upcoming graduation in May, about the foundation's expansion plans, about Eleanor's visit planned for the holidays. Jennifer was hosting Christmas dinner at her new house, the one she had bought with a promotion at work. The family would all be together, as they were every year now. As they prepared to leave, Sophie placed her hand on the oak tree's rough bark. Thank you, she whispered, for holding me that night, for keeping me alive long enough for Dad to find me. The tree stood silent and strong, as it had for 100 years, as it would for 100 more. It had witnessed suffering, and it had witnessed salvation. Both were part of its story now, woven into the wood and the roots and the earth. On the drive back, Thomas's phone rang. It was Karen from the foundation. A girl had just been brought into their Austin office, rescued from a situation similar to Sophie's. She was scared, traumatized, not speaking. Karen wondered if Sophie might be able to come talk to her. Sophie did not hesitate. Tell her I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Sophie walked into the foundation's main office. The walls were covered with artwork from children they had helped, thank you cards, photos of smiling families. This place had become a second home to Sophie over the years. Karen met her in the lobby. She's in room 3. 15 years old. Name is Maria. She's been through hell. Won't talk to anyone. But she saw your picture on the wall and asked who you were. Sophie took a deep breath and walked down the familiar hallway to room 3. She knocked gently and entered. A teenage girl sat huddled in a chair, thin and pale, dark circles under her eyes. She looked up when Sophie entered, and Sophie saw herself 5 years ago reflected in those haunted eyes. Hi Maria, Sophie said softly, sitting across from her. My name is Sophie. I heard you asked about me. Maria's voice was barely audible. You're the girl from the oak tree. I am. And you're a survivor too. I know you don't believe that yet, but you are. You're here. You're safe. And you're going to be okay. How do you know? Sophie leaned forward. Because I was where you are. I was scared and hurt, and I thought I'd never feel normal again. But Maria, I did. It took time and help and patience. But I healed. I went to college. I have a family who loves me. I have a life I never dreamed I could have. And you can have that too. What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Hurt things heal. And we're going to help you heal. Maria looked at Sophie with desperate hope, the same hope Sophie had seen in Amanda's eyes years ago. The same hope that had kept Sophie alive under the oak tree when she had wanted to give up. Will you stay? Maria asked. While I talk to the social worker.